Have you ever shaken hands on a deal that felt like a victory, only to wake up 6 months later and realize you'd been played from the very beginning? Picture this. A young entrepreneur, excited about his first major partnership, signs away half his company. The other guy calls it collaboration, talks about synergy and shared vision. Fast forward half a year, and our entrepreneur is sitting in his apartment at 2 a.m., staring at the contract he was too excited to read carefully, understanding with brutal clarity that he gave away everything for absolutely nothing. Not because he was foolish, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he didn't know the game was being played until the game was already over. Here is what nobody tells you about climbing the ladder of success. The most expensive lessons aren't the projects that fail or the risks that do and pay off. Those teach you something and move on. The truly devastating lessons are the ones where you think you're winning while someone else is, quietly rewriting the rules in their favor. You feel smart, strategic, ahead of the curve, right up until the moment you realize you were the mark all along. And by then, it's too late to do anything except learn and vow never to be that blind again. Imagine walking into a battlefield where half the soldiers aren't wearing uniforms. They're smiling, shaking hands, talking about cooperation while positioning their weapons behind their backs. Most men go through their entire careers never understanding this reality. They operate on the assumption that everyone plays fair, that hard work speaks for itself, that competence and character are enough. And for some blessed souls in some protected environments, maybe that's true. But the higher you climb, the more you'll encounter a different breed of player. People who've mastered the art of looking like allies while operating as adversaries. People who say, "I want to help you win," while ensuring you never do. The question isn't whether these people exist. If you've worked anywhere, dated anyone, built anything of value, you already know they do. Maybe you've felt that nagging sensation in your gut during a conversation that seemed perfectly friendly on the surface. Maybe you've watched someone you trusted turn out to be something else entirely. Maybe you re-watching it happen to someone right now and can't quite articulate what you're re-seeing. That instinct you're feeling? That's pattern recognition trying to break through. Your subconscious mind has picked up on something your conscious mind hasn't named yet. What I'm about to share with you isn't about becoming cynical or paranoid. This isn't about trusting no one and seeing conspiracies everywhere you look. That's just another form of blindness, honestly. This is about something far more practical and powerful. Learning to see the patterns that manipulators run on repeat. Because here's the secret that changes everything once you understand it. Manipulators aren't creative. They're not inventing new tactics. They're running the same handful of plays that have worked for centuries, slightly updated for modern contexts, but fundamentally identical to strategies that were old when your grandparents were young. Back in 1513, a man named Niccolo Machiavelli wrote a book called The Prince. History remembers it as philosophy, but that's a polite way of describing what it actually was. A cold, calculated instruction manual for acquiring power and keeping it. For 500 years, people at the highest levels have been using the tactics Machiavelli documented. The difference is that most people never read the playbook. They don't know these patterns have names, histories, counters. They're playing checkers while others are playing chess, and they don't even realize the games are different. Let me tell you about the first pattern, because it catches almost everyone at least once. Someone you barely know suddenly becomes very interested in you. Not just casually interested, but genuinely enthusiastic about working together. They're talking about synergy, about perfect timing, about how aligned your visions are. They make it sound like destiny that you two connected right now. And if you're honest, it feels good. Someone sees your value. Someone wants to collaborate. Someone believes in what you're building. Every meeting ends with excitement and possibility. Here is what is actually happening behind that enthusiasm. They've identified something you have that they want. Could be your network, the audience you've built, your technical skills, your connection to someone they're trying to reach, your reputation in an industry, your access to resources. Whatever it is, they've done the math. The equation in their head reads, if I align myself with this person, I gain access to X. There's nothing inherently wrong with strategic partnerships. Business is strategic by nature. The problem isn't that they want something from you. The problem is that they're pretending they don't. They're wrapping extraction in the language of collaboration, and most people can't tell the difference until it's too late. Machiavelli was brutally honest about this dynamic. He said alliances should be based on mutual advantage, not loyalty or affection. And he was absolutely right. The mistake isn't forming strategic partnerships. Smart people do that all the time. The mistake is confusing a strategic alliance with a genuine relationship. One is transactional and conditional. The other is built on something deeper that withstands inconvenience and cost. When you treat a transaction like a relationship, you get hurt. When you treat a relationship like a transaction, you lose something valuable. The key is knowing which is which. So how do you spot someone who's strategically using you while pretending to be your partner? First, notice the timing of when they appeared. Where were they 6 months ago when you were struggling? Where were they a year ago when nobody knew your name? Nowhere. Strategic operators don't show up during the struggle. They show up right when you start winning, right when you have something they want access to. Second, listen to how they talk about the partnership. They know everything about what you can do for them, but when you ask what they bring to the table, suddenly everything becomes vague. They have connections, they know people, they can open doors. Which doors? Which people? What specifically have they done that demonstrates this capability? Make them be specific. Real partners can articulate their value clearly. Users hide behind generalities. Third, and this is the most revealing test of all, see if they show up when it costs them something. Real partners make sacrifices for the partnership. They invest time, energy, resources, reputation when it matters. Strategic users disappear the exact moment helping you becomes inconvenient. They're busy, they're traveling, they're dealing with something urgent. But watch closely, and 3 months later, they're back with another opportunity where you can help them. I learned this pattern the expensive way. Had someone constantly reaching out about collaboration opportunities whenever I had something they wanted. The moment I needed something from them, complete radio silence. 3 months of ignored messages. Then suddenly, they're back in my inbox with another amazing opportunity we should explore together. That's when I finally understood. Some people are genuine partners who invest in mutual success. Other people are strategic users who've learned to speak the language of partnership fluently, without ever meaning a word of it. The counter move is refreshingly simple once you see it. Keep strategic relationships strategic. Professional, boundaried, transactional in the honest sense. Never become emotionally invested until someone has proven themselves over time, and not just during good times. Real character shows up when it's difficult. But at least those operators are relatively obvious once you know the pattern. This next type is far more subtle and far more common. Picture yourself in a meeting. Someone's presenting a strategy. They're using all the impressive language, strategic alignment, synergistic approach, value optimization, leveraging core competencies, disruptive innovation frameworks. It sounds sophisticated because it is sophisticated. They've practiced this performance. Every slide is polished. Every transition is smooth. Their confidence fills the room. But then the meeting ends, and you walking back to your desk when a strange realization hits you. What did they actually say? What are they actually going to do? What specific actions are happening this week? You can't quite put your finger on it, but you realize you just watched 30 minutes of impressive presentation that contains zero concrete commitments. Welcome to what I call competence theater, and once you see it, you'll notice it everywhere. Machiavelli wrote explicitly about this. He said a prince should appear competent while delegating the actual work to subordinates. Modern translation: some people have perfected the art of looking valuable without ever being valuable. They've mastered the performance of expertise without developing actual expertise. And in organizations that reward appearance over substance, these performers rise to shocking levels before anyone notices they've never actually delivered anything. The pattern looks like this. They're incredible in meetings. Articulate, confident, always have an intelligent-sounding opinion about everything. But when it's time to execute, suddenly they're too high level for implementation. They're focused on strategy, on the big picture, on vision, which is just elaborate code for someone else, does the real work while they take credit for the thinking. Watch their language carefully. When they say, "we should explore that," they mean someone else should do that. "Let's circle back" means they're hoping you forget. "I'll delegate that to my team" means they don't actually know how to do it themselves. "I am more of a big picture person" means they can't or won't do detailed work. I once worked with someone who was genuinely brilliant in presentations. Watching them in meetings was like watching a TED Talk. 6 months into the relationship, I sat down to review what we accomplished together and made a disturbing discovery. They had never actually delivered a single complete project. Not one. They'd started things, suggested things, strategized about things, but when it came to finished, working, deployable results, there was nothing with their name on it. They had perfected the performance of being indispensable while being completely dispensable. And here, as the truly insane part, they kept getting promoted because they mastered the appearance of value in a system that measured appearances. How do you spot competence theater before you hire someone, partner with someone, or promote someone into a position where their lack of substance becomes your problem? Simple. Ask for specifics. Not strategy, not vision, not philosophy. Specifics. What exactly did you build? Show me the actual work product. Walk me through how you solved this problem step by step. Real competence handles scrutiny beautifully. Theater crumbles the moment you ask for evidence. When you're evaluating people, judge them by their receipts, not their resume. Not what they say they did, but what they can prove they created. In a world full of people who can talk impressively about work, the people who can actually execute are worth everything. Now, those first two patterns are about people climbing upward. But this next one is about people who they already climbed, and now they're repulling the ladder up behind them to protect their position. You've heard that knowledge is power. Everyone's heard that. But here's what they don't tell you. Some people weaponize knowledge. They don't share it to empower. They hoard it to control. Imagine you're trying to learn something critical to your role. A process, a system, how something actually works in your organization. And there's one person who knows. Just one person. Every time you ask them a question, they give you just enough information to keep you dependent, but never enough to make you independent. They answer in ways that require you to come back. They skip steps. They make it sound more complicated than it is. That's not accidental. That's strategic. Machiavelli understood this principle deeply. Information is leverage. The moment everyone knows what you know, you become replaceable. So you keep people in the dark. You make yourself the bottleneck, the single point of failure. And then you call it being invaluable to the organization. What does this look like in practice? They're mysteriously the only person who knows how critical systems work. When you ask for documentation, they say it's complicated. Easier if you just ask them each time. When you suggest training someone else, they say they've been meaning to write it down, but never do. When you ask direct questions, you get vague answers. Not because the subject is actually complicated, but because clarity would empower you, and empowering you threatens their position. I've watched entire companies held hostage by information gatekeepers. One person who won't share passwords, won't document processes, won't train their replacement. And management doesn't fire them, because they're terrified. What if everything breaks when this person leaves? What if we lose critical knowledge? But that's not value. That's hostage-taking dressed up as indispensability. The protection against this is straightforward. Document everything yourself. Every time you learn something from them, write it down immediately. Build your own knowledge base. Find alternative sources. There's always another way to learn, other people who've done similar work. Never let one person be your only source of critical information. And if you're in leadership, fire these people. I know that sounds harsh, but someone who deliberately makes themselves irreplaceable is actually your biggest liability. What happens when they get sick, quit, or get hit by a bus? Your entire operation dies. Build systems, not dependencies. Real value comes from making others more capable, not keeping them dependent. The patterns we've covered so far are about recognizing players in professional environments. But this final one applies everywhere. Work, relationships, family, friendships. And it might be the most dangerous manipulation on this entire list. Someone gives you an ultimatum wrapped in urgency. This deal expires tonight. If you don't decide right now, immediately, the opportunity vanishes forever. We need your answer before you leave this room. Probably lies. Here's what manipulators understand you need to understand. People make terrible decisions under pressure. When you're rushed, you skip due diligence. You ignore red flags. You override your instinct because there's no time to think it through. That's not an accident. That's the entire strategy. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. Fear and urgency make people compliant. A prince should strike while people are afraid and off balance. Modern manipulators use the exact same tactic, just updated language. A job offer that requires an answer by end of business today before you can review the full contract or talk to your family. The investment opportunity only available to the first 5 people who commit. The relationship that moves at lightning speed, because when you know, right? The business deal where supposedly someone else is interested, so we need to move fast before they take it. Here's your rule, simple and non-negotiable. Any deal that evaporates because you wanted 24 hours to think was never a good deal. Legitimate opportunities withstand scrutiny. Legitimate people respect your need to make informed decisions. Pressure is a sales tactic. Urgency is manufactured to prevent you from thinking clearly, and it works. That's exactly why they use it. Your counter move is to slow down deliberately, especially when others are trying to rush you. Say these exact words. I make decisions on my timeline, not yours. If that doesn't work for you, I understand. Then stop talking. Don't explain, don't apologize, don't justify. Just wait. 9 times out of 10, suddenly the deadline becomes flexible. The opportunity can wait after all. Turns out they need you more than you need them. And that 1 time out of 10 where they actually walk away, you just avoided something terrible. Because anything that requires immediate commitment without time for proper evaluation is either a scam or a bad deal. Sometimes both. Winners control the tempo. They don't dance to someone else's manufactured urgency.